I am very honored to be here this evening to represent Moderna. For those of you who don't know Moderna, we're the vaccine company. I am the director. Just to be clear, there's a few people out there who don't know. But I have to say that I can't imagine a better title for an advocacy group or for an event that, regarding COVID than Marked by COVID. Because the reality is we have all been marked by COVID to different degrees, perhaps. But I think that when you think about the ongoing burden, there's parents out there whose kids are still struggling to catch up in school. Anxiety and depression, and especially in adolescence, is through the roof. People's careers were changed. People have long COVID that they deal with and aren't taken seriously, right? And struggle with that all the time. And then there are those who've lost a loved one. And I do think that there is this need to remember the huge numbers of people that were marked in that way. Because I think since we've moved beyond those peaks that we saw in the pandemic, and we're now in an endemic situation, we very much feel this like sigh of relief, when I think that is a little bit inappropriate or a little too soon to be there. Because one of the things we know is COVID has not gone away, right? I hate to be the dry science person tonight, and I'm not artistic and creative, but the reality is CDC will tell you if you go on their website, and it's not just the elderly, right, who are being hospitalized and put into the ICU. Yes, if you look at the lines here, those 50 and older are at the highest risk, but then look at that third line down. That's the little ones, 0 to 4 years old. And these, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, are not all kids with underlying health conditions. A significant proportion of these little ones were otherwise healthy kids, and they are ending up in the hospital and dying. As of October of this year, 7 million people worldwide have died from COVID-19. In the US, and Kristen just mentioned this, people continue to die. 1 to 2 people per 100,000 every week continue to die. And if we go to the elderly, 75 and older, that number jumps up to about 15. So that's a significant number of people that continue to die from COVID. Moderna is proud of the role that we played in helping to mitigate the pandemic. The WHO has estimated that in the first year of vaccination alone, 20 million lives were saved. That's a 63% reduction in deaths globally. But again, I think we need to take a step back from that pandemic lens and look at what's still happening today. To translate that 1 to 2 per 100,000, that means in the month of October, anywhere weekly, it went from about 500 to about 1,700 people in the US died, and that's 2024. And I think we are so, again, used to, as we stopped using the term pandemic and started just saying it's endemic, right? It's like flu. It's not like flu, right? More people die to a much greater extent from COVID than the flu. So we need to do better. We need to really stop and say, this is still a real problem, and we're still losing people to this disease. There's also those individuals who are suffering from long COVID. This is a really frustrating situation, right? It manifests with over 200 different symptoms. It affects every organ system in the body, from cardiovascular to musculoskeletal to the reproductive system. On autopsy, they find the presence of virus in every organ in the body. When you look at the numbers of people who have either reported having had long COVID or currently have long COVID, it's estimated to be about 3 in 10 people. And of those 3 in 10, about a quarter of them have significant impact to their daily lives. They can no longer take care of themselves or their families. They can no longer do activities that they used to enjoy. They don't interact with their friends, their neighbors, their communities are impacted. This is a real issue in that there's really no clear path for diagnosis or for treatment. A lot of these individuals about 3.5 million have had to leave the workforce. That's about 1.5 billion work hours lost last year in the US, which had a huge impact on our economy. This hit our GDP at a tune of about $152 billion. But let's not make this about money. I mean, the reality is, if you were one of those people, you have lost the ability to provide for yourself, to provide for your family, and for many people, that's a loss of identity, right? We define ourselves by our careers in a lot of cases, by what we do day to day, and they have lost that. Kids, this is becoming more and more recognized. It's a huge frustration to me working in the COVID space every single day that the vaccination rates for kids are miserable. They're in single digits, right? But kids are not immune to long COVID either. They may present with a different symptom cluster than adults do. But what we're finding out is that they have cognitive impairment. This prevents them from concentrating and doing well in school. They have the same fatigue, exhaustion, headaches that prevent them from interacting with their peers or having a social life. And really, what's also unfortunate is many times their issues are attributed to behavioral or psychological issues, and that has a real impact on their mental health. So again, this is a real issue that we need to recognize and start to treat and start to really try to prevent, if nothing else, than by, vaccination at the very least. But we do need to do better, and I think that's the message that we just heard. We need to do better. There are over 200 viruses worldwide that infect humans, and we're finding more every day. And of those 200, there's vaccines available for only about 25. And some of these vaccines do not even really adequately deal with the burden of those diseases. And so we know that, again, we need to do better because the odds are, experts will tell you, another pandemic is likely. We are a globally connected society. We are interacting with wildlife much more closely than we ever have. There's climate change going on. We also know that when there are outbreaks of infections, they're difficult to mitigate because there's unequal access to health care, and there is vaccine hesitancy and lots of misinformation out there. So all of these things converge to make the likelihood of another pandemic very, very much a reality. At Moderna, we do take this responsibility seriously. I was talking before the event that when this was in 2019, the fall of 2019, and Moderna had been working on a vaccine platform, and they were in discussions with the government about pandemic preparedness, and they were going to do sort of a dry run. And then all of a sudden there's an outbreak of this respiratory infection in China. So that dry run actually became the real thing. And, thank goodness for the technology and the platform that allowed for the development of vaccine very quickly. But again, we need to sort of look ahead. So what we're doing now is we are trying to develop vaccines against some of the pathogens that are considered of public importance by the WHO. In addition, we also know that SARS-CoV-2 is a very unstable virus, right? It continues to mutate. We don't know what the next iteration of Omicron may be, right? We are in JN1 and KP2, and now XCC is coming around the bend. We don't know when it will become more pathogenic, so we continue to update the vaccine in the hope of staving off another possible surge. We are also increasing the stability of our vaccine with our next generation vaccine so that we can help address some of these inequities and the burden of disease. We are trying to make it more immunogenic to protect those people who are really at highest risk. We're trying to increase vaccination coverage across respiratory diseases by creating combination vaccines. So we recognize that there is a responsibility to help to address what could be the next huge, as we're saying, tragedy. So our mission is to deliver the greatest possible impact to people through mRNA medicines. We take this very seriously, we do. And I think that what we've been talking about tonight, the loss of life due to COVID, is something that does motivate and drive us. I think it is something that we, as we have moved on and we've breathed this sigh of relief, I don't think we can do that. We have to do better. We have to remember what we've lost so that we can depoliticize vaccination. We can increase vaccination coverage rates. We can provide more resources to learn about long COVID and how to help people with long COVID. I mean, there's such a myriad of things that we need to support and learn about as far as the impact of this pandemic has gone. It's not okay to sit back and breathe this sigh of relief. And again, our hope is that events like this evening and remembering those who we did lose to this terrible disease will help to drive and motivate us to deliver on our promise. Thank you for your time tonight.